Hi, I'm Travis Fiero, and welcome to the first episode of Into the Dark with Travis Fiero. I am a drag king in Chicago, Illinois, and I used to be a tour guide. I love history, I love spooky shit, so basically this is going to be a little series of me telling you guys all this random information I have. I love ghost stories, I love darker history, and I love drag. So I'm gonna be telling you in drag and also visiting a lot of the sites and just kind of exploring it so you don't have to. So I've actually been thinking about doing this series for so long. I was a tour guide here in Chicago on those boats downtown, you know the ones. I was a tour guide for about 2.5 years, and it delved me into just researching so much history about this city. And it was an architecture tour, so I had to kind of just stick to like the architects and the buildings. But I always ended up wanting to just tell the ghost stories. So I wanted to make this series so I could share some of the knowledge I have and have an excuse to keep researching anything and everything spooky. But I look really fucking good in this. We're gonna be talking about something called the city cemetery. Now, this is one of my favorite kind of unknown things about Chicago. If you've been to Lincoln Park, which is, for those of you not from Chicago or don't live in Chicago, Lincoln Park is one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. And that neighborhood is actually one giant graveyard. There's 10,000 bodies still buried underneath all of the development that you see. Established in 1843, City Cemetery consisted of 4 sections: a Catholic cemetery, a Jewish cemetery, an area for privately owned plots, and an area for the poor, the unclaimed, and the disgraced, a Potter's Field. 4,000 of the people that were buried in Potter's Field were actually Confederate soldiers because they were taken as prisoners during the Civil War, and when they died, you know, they're prisoners of war. They don't get their own graves, so they were put in the Potter's Field. And most people say they would be approximately underneath the baseball fields in Gold Coast, making that the second most racist baseball field in the city of Chicago. This was Chicago's only cemetery at the time, and with the constant outbreaks of cholera and general poor hygiene of the era, the plots filled fast. Between the years of 1843 and 1859, tens of thousands of people were laid to rest there, but it was not exactly easy to bury people so close to the lake. Chicago is built on marshland, and the damp and watery soil close to the lake began shifting bodies around even after burial. Complaints of resurfacing bodies and a general stench of decay plagued the otherwise beautiful shoreline. City Cemetery was not a pleasant place for the living, and in 1866, the city halted burial by the lakeshore, as many of the burial plots were actually filling with water from Lake Michigan. So I want to paint a picture for you guys. Chicago, mid-1800s. You're digging a hole. You're a grave digger digging a hole, and at about 4 feet in, that hole starts just filling with water from Lake Michigan. And now you have to put a body that was usually in a very cheap wooden casket in that hole, and the water is gonna keep filling it up. Gross. That's fucking gross. Are you kidding? Like, no wonder they wanted to move stuff. Like, that is just like the last place you want to put anything dead is in water. That's why I don't get why people wash chicken. Right, so this was a very real concern. These bodies were getting flushed with Lake Michigan water, but then water is not stagnant. That shit goes right back into Lake Michigan, which is the water source of the city. And so people were just drinking corpse water. Jesus Christ. Predictably, wealthier families began digging up and moving their dead to the newly established prettier cemeteries like Graceland and Rose Hill, while the rest of the bodies remained victim to the elements. Concerns were voiced that the bodies were contributing to the cholera outbreak. Having rotting corpses so close to the city's water supply, Lake Michigan, was declared a public health crisis, and families were asked to come and remove the bodies of their loved ones so that the cemetery could be eradicated. Unsurprisingly, very few families were able to accomplish this. Only 10 men were hired to remove the thousands of bodies in Potter's Field.
so progress was slow. Removal began in 1868, but in 1872, the Great Chicago Fire swept through the city, destroying every grave marker except one.
Another fun fact about the graves of City Cemetery, like the actual holes, is that during the Chicago Fire, a lot of people were saved by these graves because there were so many holes that were open still. There were so many open graves that people, to escape the flames, jumped into the graves and the flames just kind of skipped right over them. And a lot of these graves were full of water anyway, so it was like kind of a double protection system.
This made it almost impossible to locate the remaining bodies, and the city basically just gave up and began building over it. It is estimated that there are at least 10,000 forgotten bodies left in the area, and every couple of years, a new construction project stumbles upon a few skeletons. But perhaps the most astonishing discovery happened in 1998 during the construction of the parking lot for the Chicago History Museum. During construction of the 2-story parking lot, 81 bodies, complete and fragmented, were found, including one iron coffin with a theoretically intact body inside.
So when they found this iron sarcophagus, everyone was really excited at first because that's airtight, mama. That's airtight, which means no air can get into it to cause decomposition of the body, at least not as much as we would usually see. So everything else might be skeletal remains. That was probably a body. Now I say was because unfortunately when they were excavating this iron coffin, one of the workers actually clipped the side of the coffin and punctured a little hole in it. This caused air to whoosh in and sped up the decomposition of the body. So immediately these remains went from being what was probably a fairly tangible corpse of sorts to essentially a human soup. But one of my very favorite stories is actually of, it takes place in the Lincoln Park Zoo, which is, if you're not in Chicago, it's the big free zoo we got. If you have been broke in this city, you have been to the Lincoln Park Zoo. Now they have a fairly new exhibit, which is this like really cutesy barn that you can go and pet like goats and sheep and cows and like learn about how you farm and shit. Because it's the Midwest and you gotta know that. But when they were building this barn, they found 10 skeletons. Construction workers should know about City Cemetery because that would be somewhat traumatic to find like a skull when you're just at work. Lester Fisher was the guy, the Lincoln Park Zoo director, so he was the one calling the shots on these bodies. He contacted the city of Chicago and was like, hey, I want to do the right thing with these bodies. What do I do? Legally, they belong to the state. That's a rule. Like, if they don't know who you are and your body's really old. Also, I shouldn't be saying bodies. They're skeletal remains. It's not really a graveyard anymore, is it? They're all excavation sites. Anyway, so Lester, he contacted the city and he waited a while. He waited like 3 weeks. Nobody ever got back to him. So he put them back. Put the bodies back, and the barn is there. So he just built the barn right on top of these skeletal remains. So there's actually been a lot of ghostly activity that's been reported in this barn from just, sounds going off or the animals suddenly going crazy, people feeling cold spots, people feeling tension, all kinds of stuff like that. So if you have a story about that barn, please let me know, because I've never personally experienced anything there except for, a couple goats and stuff. So, but I do have a great goat impression.
As I mentioned earlier, only one grave marker survived the Chicago fire, and it can still be seen today. The Couch Tomb, the oldest fire zone building left. Built in 1858, it, in theory, holds the body of Ira Couch, a wealthy hotel owner of the time. When City Cemetery was being removed, the Couch family fought to keep the mausoleum there, claiming it being simply too heavy and too expensive to move. Now, the great mystery of the Couch Tomb is that we're not actually sure if there are any remains inside. Ira Couch and his family are recorded as being buried in Rose Hill Cemetery, and there's no labeling on the tomb other than the word couch. In fact, there's great speculation that there might not even be any bodies in there at all.
The Couch family actually didn't, there's a couple reports of them either not wanting to pay to get it moved. Also, they were saying they physically couldn't do it. There was no way to actually transport this incredibly heavy mausoleum to a different cemetery. So it just stayed. It remained this entire time. It's been there in various states of disrepair, and the city has only recently really kind of made it nice and made it cute and put some like a little fence around it and like some lights and stuff like that. But Couch Tomb actually does have one supernatural story around it. Not only do the lights around the tomb kind of flash on and off randomly at night, but also there's reports of what people have been saying is someone called the Gray Lady, presumably because we don't know who she is, and she's a ghost, so she's gray. But she leaves the tomb at sunset and meanders around Lincoln Park and then comes back at sunrise and just like walks right into the tomb. So that is the story of City Cemetery, Chicago's very first cemetery that never really left. I want to know how you guys feel about it. Like, if you live in either Lincoln Park, Old Town, or Gold Coast, let me know. Have you seen anything? Do you feel weird about living there now, knowing that there's probably a body underneath you somewhere? Is this fucked up? Should we have done something about this? Is the city of Chicago completely immoral for not paying to excavate and relocate these bodies? What do you think? Hit me up in the comments. Hit me up on Instagram at Travis Fiero or on Twitter at Fiero Travis. This is a whole series, so please hit subscribe if you're interested in drag, horror, spooky shit, all that kind of stuff. I'm hoping to really go to new places and expand on this. So please let me know what you want to hear, if you have any stories yourself, or, if you are a drag queen or a drag performer in the city and you have a negative COVID test and you like spooky shit, let's go see some spooky shit. Always down. So thank you so much for joining us. Please tell your friends, subscribe, and thank you for coming with us into the dark.